Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, episode number 70. Yeah, man, 70. That seems like so many episodes, but thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Ellery Wells, and again, this is the Empowered Podcast, and I'm here to empower and equip you. This is part number 3 in a 4-part series about live events, helping you take your business, take your blog, your podcast to that next level by creating in-person, face-to-face, human-to-human live events in your local area. In the first episode in this series, which was episode number 68, we had Laura Elgaita from Florida who started the podcast South Florida Meetup, one of the most successful podcaster meetups in the United States as far as I can tell. She gave us some great tips. You can go to empoweredpodcast.com/68 and download Laura's tips for creating an awesome meetup. And then we had Lou Mangello in episode 69. You can go to empoweredpodcast.com/69 and download his tips for creating a magical meetup. And we use the word magical because his podcast and his events are all around the most magical place on earth, Walt Disney World. And I know that's going to be an awesome episode for you to check out. Today we have Keith Griffis on the show. And Keith hosted a meetup in the Boston area with over 1,000 members and was wildly successful. However, whenever we decided to get this on the calendar, whenever I got the chance to connect with him, we had some tech issues and we didn't get all the way into the live events and how to create it. But don't tune out yet, because in this episode, Keith gives us some of the absolute best resources for shortening your startup time. It's based on, or his principle is based on the lean startup principle, but we talk about how you can take your launch date and move it up, make it sooner so that you can get your product released, your business released, or your app released, or even your event hosted sooner. So he gives us a multi-step process that breaks it down into simple steps that you can apply today, as soon as you are done with this podcast, to start taking steps forward. And I know you're going to want to download Keith's tips for getting started faster. So go to empoweredpodcast.com/70. That's empoweredpodcast.com/70. There's a box in there. Put in your email and I will send you Keith's tips. So go check that out. Let's go right into the episode. Enjoy. Today, I have a really cool guest. I've gotten to meet him in person. I've chatted with him online several times. And he, just like you might be, he has a full-time job, but he started another business on the side. He's a father, he's a husband, and I'm really excited to share our conversation with you today. Let's welcome Keith Griffis to the show. How are you doing today, Keith?
I'm doing great, Ellery. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Did I say that right? It's Griffis?
That is correct. You are one of the few to actually pronounce it correct the first time.
Well, hey, with a name like Ellery, I pay attention to spelling very closely. So I'm big on, and that's part of your brand. So, I want to make sure we get it right.
Thank you.
So, just like I mentioned, you've got a lot going on, right? You've got a wife and an 18-month-old child. You have co-founded a business, and I want to talk about all of that, how you chose the co-founder, how you decided to go with this type of business, but we'll get into that eventually. And like I said, I'm excited to share your story with us today. Just first, before we go into the background, tell us, what is If Simply and ifsimply.com?
Sure. So If Simply is a membership and online course platform that allows you to really, really simply get up and running within 5 minutes or less with your own product to begin selling your knowledge.
And what I liked is your introductory video, and it's basically, to boil it down, it's not very long. I'd highly recommend everybody go and check it out at ifsimply.com. It's about 1:25 unless Keith changes it on me. But the whole idea is, what could you do if simply you had the tools? what kind of product or membership site specifically, I believe, what would you do if you simply had the tools? And I think that's a perfect segue, Keith, into why you decided to go into this. I mean, do you have technical knowledge? Can you create all this stuff, or walk us through that?
Sure. So for me, I was really more, I will say I'm an engineer originally. So I did do web development, but I was never the really genius tech guy. I was always the guy who could figure things out, but preferred not to because I just really wanted to focus on the bigger picture of things. So
Sounds like me a little bit.
yeah,
I've learned a little bit of HTML, but that's not what I want to do.
exactly. I mean, you learn pretty quickly what you're good at and what what you can do. And I think that's a really big distinction for me was I can do a lot of these things and if I sit down and spend the time, but I realized I was most valuable in helping people, myself included, package the information and structure the information. So what I was doing, I was coaching clients and I was building one-off membership sites. And I got really, really frustrated because all these tools, the scripts that I was using based on WordPress were going down and I'd have to update them. And most of the time I wasn't getting paid for it. So I decided that there has to be a much simpler way for people to create and manage this stuff. And so we set out to make one that, was incredibly simple to the point where you didn't even need an administrator interface. Like WordPress, you have to go to this back end that doesn't look like what it's going to look like to your customers. Yeah. We just threw that out the window and we said, what is the easiest possible thing we could do? And we said, well, if it looked exactly like it did to the customer and you just typed over what you needed to change. And so that's what we ended up building. But it was ultimately just because of the tools were just so limiting and I was so frustrated about how long it took to get up and running and people just frustrated by the end of the whole process that they didn't even focus on the most important part, which is the customer and the content.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and I'm with you. I don't like bashing competitors either. But are you competing against companies or products like Wishlist Member and what's the other one we were just talking about the other day? Optimized Press and those kinds of things? Is that a competitor to you, or how does that fit in?
So I mean, it's sort of an in-between, I'd say. We're somewhere between Udemy, which is kind of like not your platform at all, but really easy to use, to Wishlist and those, which is, something that's really, really customizable. We give people a very, straightforward and templated approach that we test. I'd say we're sort of like the lead pages type model, where it's just very focused and very streamlined. We have video courses inside your membership club. We call it a membership club as opposed to a site because you don't have to host it on your own. And you have a discussion area, forum, and an article area. And then you can link out to your Facebook Facebook groups or anything else that you have that you want to connect up. But we're sort of very streamlined and focused. So I say we somewhat compete, but we're kind of in the middle of the road.
Well, one of the things, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time in your site, but one of the things that I immediately noticed, Keith, was, like you said, how it appears on your page as the I want to say admin, but like you said before, you don't really need an admin, but that's probably the technical term. Whoever owns the membership club, how it looks to you is how it's going to look to the public. It's very easy, drag and drop, and it's a really simple. I want to say simple, but that's the point of the site, right?
Yep.
It's a really simple way to set these things up, and you don't have to know a lot of coding. But that's where your partner, the really technical engineer, came in, and he did a great job of making it simple to use and making it easy to use, so that people like me who maybe we know how to code some of this stuff, or we've picked up HTML along the way, we don't have to. And that's what I really liked about that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a process for us to get to that point. We certainly we took the model where you just sort of build it, test it. So the lean startup model in the entrepreneurial world. And yeah, the genius really comes from my co-founder Justin, he's talk about a geek, in a good way. He is,
of course,
he's brilliant, programmer, brilliant, person. Just overall, he gets it, and the melding of our two skill sets, where I had the content background, the training background, and really knew how to draw things out of people in the process, and then he really brought the chops to say, okay, well, give me your wish list and I'll make it work, which is so different from
Awesome.
so many programming, jobs in the past. Usually you go to people and they tell you the limitations of the tool, and then you have to work around it. So that was the big
Yeah.
difference. Is I could just put my wish list out there.
That's awesome. Different topic for you. How long from idea to implementation before you had something to say, "Hey, mom"? Because I know if your mom's like my mom's like, "What are you doing online?" Nobody really understands it. But how
Yeah.
long did it take to go from idea to, "Hey, you can go to ifsimply.com and we have a functioning product"? How long did that take?
Yeah, I wished it took longer, but it was probably around 8 months, just because we were doing things sort of in tandem. I was doing a
Hmm.
lot of stuff. I was still coaching customers, and that was a big part of my business on the side prior. So, If Simply was sort of born from that, and I think we took it slow in the beginning, and then we sort of ramped up once we started seeing people really just showing an interest, and realized we have to get this thing out.
Now, did you say you wish it had taken longer?
No, no, I wish it had taken less time.
Okay, okay. I was gonna
It's
say that.
it's the
That's
dream of
not what
getting
I
it out as
normally hear.
quickly as possible, but no, it was a process for us to test, and I think the I got some good insights in the process of how I would have accelerated that. But
Could you give us a few?
sure, I just
I'm sure you were hustling almost 24/7 anyway. So,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I mean,
if
mind you, all this sort of started right. My son's 18 months old, so this started a couple of years ago, and well, I guess it started right around the time he was born, actually.
oh
Um,
wow, you were
so
busy.
yeah, so that was a bit of a struggle. So anyway, we learned that getting physically in front of a customer as quickly as possible was the best thing. Um, Also, we learned that our assumptions about who the customer was, we needed to test even sooner. I
Were they
had
what you thought initially? Did they change?
They did change, actually. We had originally gone after really the blogger, and mommy bloggers specifically, which,
Oh,
as interesting as it was. And we did that based on the notion that a lot of the folks I was helping were in that space. They tend to build community. So the thought was a membership site would be phenomenal for these people, because the communities they have and the communities that could adopt it would be explosive in terms of growth. And we've seen that.
yeah.
But what we didn't really think about was these are folks who are used to a single medium. They're people who are very text focused. And when it comes to membership sites and online courses, they weren't necessarily prepared to create multimedia content, which is what really sells. So, like video, narrated video is really the creme de la creme in terms of content when you're purchasing a course online. So these folks weren't really prepared to do that, so there was this gap in this learning curve that we found, that I would spend far more time getting them up to speed than it was even worth for the company.
Yeah, if one thing that parents love is talking about their kids and reading about other people's kids and comparing the two, whether they admit it or not, it's probably a big thing. And there are a ton of, to use the term, mommy bloggers, like you said, but I don't see a whole lot of video unless they're all video and it's like iPhone video after iPhone video or something. So that's interesting because you said you wanted to get your product in front of customers. How did you do that? Because you're an online company, you don't have something necessarily to say, "Hey, check this out," and hand it to them. What was that process like?
Yeah, so the process ended up being, in the beginning, a lot of setting up video interviews, and now with things like Google Hangouts, it's free to do. So it was sort of reaching out to who we thought our ideal customer was through social media, or even, a lot of times in the beginning, what I was doing was we were looking through key search terms for specific niches, and we were finding who the lead in that area was, who was getting sufficient traffic to really warrant a product like this. And we were seeing, what do they offer currently? And, shockingly, well, I guess not shockingly now, so many of them rely solely on ad revenue as their primary source of income or sponsorship. So they would wait for a big brand to reach out to them, and they would make some, small amount based on a blog post, a sponsored post. And we were telling them that, listen, you've got these huge communities of people that read your blog posts, and they're not really taking a next step. There's no place for them to join a list. There's no place for them to become a member and access any more of your content. So we were reaching out to these folks, setting up these interviews. They were loving the concept, but we realized we were trying to convince somebody to buy into our concept instead of trying to find the customers that needed our product and convincing them that we were the best product out there. So that was a fundamental shift in the business early on, that we realized that it was time to change it up. And that's where we started to say, okay, well, who are the customers that really know they need this, that are trying to take an audience and monetize it and know how to develop multimedia content, be it video or audio. And, honestly, that's where things like Podcast Movement with Jared Easley and all those folks was so pivotal for us, because we were finally home. We realized that these are the people that get what we get, that know what they need to do, that are struggling with the technology and are already comfortable with things like Libsyn and other tools that make their job easier. And so that's where we sort of realized getting physically in front of people at a conference was the best way to really make a difference and really catapult the business and get the right feedback.
That's a really good point, Keith, because there's a guy in one of my mastermind groups who is working on a fitness product, and he's catering to personal trainers to help them create a continuity program, for lack of a better term. And one of the things I told him was, it's very similar to what you said. You don't want to educate people before you can educate people. You don't want to teach them the value of your stuff before you teach them the actual stuff. You can, but you've got two big hurdles instead of just one, and you found a way to go and totally eliminate one of those hurdles by talking to people like me, talking to the podcasters like you were just saying, who we already know that we want something like this and that we need it, but we don't know necessarily which one to go with or how to go about it. And you've eliminated half of the roadblocks for you. And my friend, Coach E, or whatever the term is there, that's good advice for him. You don't want to have to create two learning curves. It's like when Starbucks created their venti and tall and all that stuff. It kind of created this in crowd, but you had to educate people. I still don't know which the venti's the tall one or the small one, but they're creating new terminology there. And you kind of said, we're not going to do that. We're going to focus on the people who already love this. We're going to focus on people who love coffee, not rebrand. We're going to focus on personal trainers, not how to become a personal trainer, whatever it is. Yep. And that's a great way to streamline. And I realize I derailed how you would shorten that 8-month process, but that's a good way to bring it back. What else would you like to have done, or would you have done differently to shorten that 8-month process? Because 8 months doesn't even seem all that long, but I know when you're in the middle of it, when you're 3 months in, and your wife's like, what are you doing locked away in the basement or the office? When are we going to start making money? When's this going to have results for your work? So I've been there and I know about that. What else would you have done to shorten that time?
So for the second sort of piece, so definitely getting in front of the right customers and identifying those right customers, that would have been step one. The other would have been, we built a lot of stuff before we actually conducted the first round of interviews, even though we were kind of doing the lean startup model of test and adjust. So I think I would have physically gotten in front of those customers sooner with less product and really just talked through and made an offer before we ever even launched.
Now, why is that?
So one of the key things that you want to do is, and this works for information products all the time, is you want to make sure you've validated your market before you even kick off. So one of the easiest ways would be to use lead pages or some other tool and create a lead capture page just offering the feature set that you think you're going to offer. So whether it's an information product, you list your bullets of the things you're going to teach, and then you put a price tag on it. Then you see how many people buy it, and then you build it. That's a very common thing that I teach everybody, but when you're in the middle of building this software product, you think, oh my God, we got to build the best possible thing that we ever, could imagine. And you're constantly trying to overcome what the next feature request is. So you're trying to come up with the next best thing and add on it. And we do this with information too. We feel this
That
need.
gives you a version 2.0 and a 3.0.
Exactly.
And that's, is that in Gillibo's book about, no, it's not in somebody else's book where, they're talking about maybe it's not even in a book, but they talk
Maybe
about
it's Ellery's
giving,
book.
yeah, maybe so.
Ellery's 2.0 book.
There you go. But giving people like most of what they ask for, but not everything, and holding something back for the upsell or the next version, so you can always keep people coming back. It sounds almost dirty, but at the same time, your best stuff is not going to be your first product anyway, and you as the creator are going to be continually getting better over time and wanting to add more features and stuff too. So it's just maybe a more strategic or tactical approach to the natural progression of personal and business development, I guess.
It's true. I mean, and the other thing about it is you're going to create something even better each time. So I know that's true. There's
my first stuff.
You've seen it, right? Firsthand. And so what's interesting is, you get people in, and if there's too much, they're not going to utilize it anyway. They're going to be overwhelmed. So it's just like when I tell people, we have coaching clients that come in and they come up with 20 different things they want to teach in this course, and it's all this amazing content. And I immediately say, wait a minute, anything more than 6 or 7 modules in a course, nobody's going to consume that. And it's going to be overwhelming. And that goes from, having 90% of the people pass through the course and want the next course to nobody going through the content at all, and then it's useless. Same thing with a product. When it's too overwhelming, the people walking in the door are going to say, oh my God, I don't know what to do, so I'll come back to this, and then they never actually do. So that's a risk.
And don't let me forget to come back about the shortening the 8-month cycle, but I have a question for you. In my course, I've got 4 weeks of content with 5 multimedia, so video, audio modules per week, plus some bonuses. Is that too much?
So how long are each of the 5 modules each week?
The videos range from maybe 7 to 20 minutes, depending on the topic. And I've tried to transcribe all of the video and audio, so there's something to read with it. And then there's usually homework. There's nothing to download, but one of the modules is like, email me X, Y, and Z, and we'll circle back and, ask how you are progressed, in 2 weeks or something like that.
So I'll give you an example. So recently I launched a course with Subi Zimmerman, who's the Instagram gal. And our course is literally 6 weeks with 10-minute modules, video modules, and one associated workbook that takes them through the entire process. So there's 2 things we could have done differently. One is we could have broken that workbook up into smaller worksheets, but I actually prefer the workbook model because if somebody wants to jumpstart what you're teaching them, they can go front to back without even watching your videos if you really wanted them to, and they could still get the value. And then the second piece is, the videos are all 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes tops, and that's 1 a week. And what that gives people is time to digest the information very rapidly. And then it gives them the opportunity to go implement what you've taught them to do this week. If I were to look at, and it depends entirely on your market, Ellery, I'll be honest with you, but if you're selling to people who are trying to, let's say, build a podcast on the side, these are people who are going to be doing this probably 1 night a week. So if you think about that for a second, they might give themselves 2 nights a week, but generally the public is going to do 1 night a week. They're going to spend some time doing it. They're going to spend a lunch break doing it. So you have to think about, how much content can they consume and put into action at that amount of time. And so I would say, you can have supplemental materials that they can reference, but if it's required to get to the next week's content, I would say pare it down to what you think they can consume in that short period of time, or 5-day period that they think they might actually, work on your course content, and then prevent them from just building it all up and then sort of giving up partway through because there's just too much in front of them. Because it happens, I think, I'd say more than 50% of the time, products fail to deliver not because they have too little content, but because they have too much content that people aren't able to really put into practice.
Yeah, the last couple interviews I've done, Keith, have left me with more questions than they've answered, and I love that for myself. And also, it frustrates the heck out of me because I'm like, man, this is not what I was planning on getting out of this chat. So would you? I know that I would be more on the side. My expertise course, would be on the side of too much content. The way that I see it, and I forget this often. I did nothing while building my business. Sure, the wife and I, we went to movies and stuff, but like all day Saturday, most of the day Sunday, from when I got home until 10 o'clock midnight at night, I was writing, I was learning how to build websites, I was learning how to do social media, and I've tried to pack all of that into a course for someone just like me who they're diving in head first with both feet. They're up to their eyeballs in it and they're loving it, but they're hustling. And so maybe I need to take more into account this 1 night a week guy or girl who they're passionate about it, but their time isn't what mine was.
Yeah, I mean, I would say honestly, it's going to depend on, that first step in producing any course content is going to be who is the customer and what do they do? What does their life look like? If they are the person like you and you're screening those people so that they're the people that are ready to jump in and spend all their time doing it, then that's fine to do it the way you're doing it, as long as you've confirmed that those are the actual people that have been buying your content or are going to buy your content. And that's where I say if you test it up front, you can test 2 different versions of the sales page, and then you can see, okay, does the one with the more intense content convert higher for the price that I'm willing to list it at? Or does the one that gives it a little bit more for the beginner audience, does that one convert higher? And, the question is, when you're giving more value like that, raise the price so that it is only people who are truly committed. Because I see that happen a lot where you'll put this amazing amount of content together, but you'll charge so low that you're getting the introductory people, but you're giving them so much content that they won't even consume it. So, moving up into I have folks that have launched $1,000 courses that have the amount of content per week that you have. I mean, I'd say, depending on the audience, you might be looking at a couple $100 product, and those folks would get them high enough in the barrier that they're willing to commit and spend the time. But it really comes down to you and who your customer is. Yeah,
I first launched at $97, and we perceive value tied to a dollar, tied to a dollar number. And one guy I talked to said you should be charging. Well, I told him I was thinking about raising it to $150, and he's like, "Man, that's stupid. You got to be charging at least $400 or $500 for this." And then I talked to another guy who, I guess they're both 15 years older than I am and been doing this for a lot longer. And another guy said, this is a $1,200 product. But to me, it's a little bit weird to charge that much. Although I know the value that it provides because it's what I went through. But not to talk about that. To circle back to a broader audience. If someone has created all of this content, and I'm thinking of you, Jason, out there listening to this. If Jason and I have all of this content and it's too much, it's like mine, 25 modules of an hour's worth of value. Should we cut 40% of it or so and or put it into a second course? Or what would you think about putting that into like an autoresponder series and trickling that content out? Instead of it being built into the course, here's a landing page, you click on the email and go view the video and you still get the value from it. What do you think about that?
So it depends a little bit about your goals. I'd say the autoresponder is great if you're looking to. It depends on the level of the content, right? If you're taking the first quarter of the course and dripping it out over time, if that is required as a fundamental to get to the second part of the course, then I'd say autoresponder's a risk, because people are generally not going to have a very high consumption rate of that. What I would actually say is, depending on how you can segment the content. So if you have modules that can live on their own and aren't critical for the complete flow of coming in and getting the outcome that you're selling them,
they refer to one another. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I mean, if they're really interdependent, then that's a struggle. But I would say if you could try to take some of that content and make it bonus material, that adds to your conversion rate. That'll get more people to buy if they feel like there's bonus material out of it. That's one quick way to do it. The other way is you could do a second, follow-on course. It could be the upsell. So you can sell the basic information, then you upsell them to the rest of the meat and potatoes that you're selling. It depends a little bit on the content, but I would say definitely pare it down. Make it so that an average customer could consume the content. And then, if there's stuff that you can pull out that are sort of, sprinkles. Nathan Latka taught me this from Heyo. He's a Facebook marketing guy, but, he said, give away the ketchup and sell the burger. And so that's really the thing. You want to give away the things that are, that add to what you're trying to sell, but you don't want to, give away the hefty stuff that people are actually going to buy. So if you can sprinkle some of the introductory stuff in an autoresponder, take the other major lumps of content, put it as bonus modules that they get as part of the course, then you could see a higher conversion rate. And it also makes people feel like, I don't have to consume this. This is huge value add that I'm getting that I can consume at a later point. That's kind of how I would approach it. Unless they're so distinct that you can break them out into different courses, in which case you can have a sequence of folks who buy this course can then buy the second course. Then, that's sort of the approach I would take.
So maybe I do have kind of each of the 4 weeks has its own kind of theme. Like this isn't exactly right, but like a mindset theme or a tools theme or a social media theme. So maybe I could break it up, and instead of one $1,200 course, I can pare it down into sections. Here's a chunk, here's a chunk, here's a chunk, or buy all 4 of them and get one for free, or something like that.
And you can do that. I'll caution you. I think a lot of what you're doing right now is trying to justify the price to yourself, more than you're trying to justify the value to your customer. I say that because, we have this tendency to not want, no matter how big you get and how much, success you have, you always struggle with putting a price against what you're providing.
Absolutely.
And it sounds, because of the way that you're trying to do it right now, you're trying to say, well, you could do this or you could do that. And then you'll get this added. Honestly, you're spending too much time giving options, and too many options means lower conversion rate. That's the same reason we don't put a header and links on a landing page. Give them one option, they say yes or they say no, and then you move on and you find the next customer who might be willing to do it. And I'll promise you that if you put that $1,200 course out there, a couple things are going to happen. One is you're going to rise to the occasion to make sure it's the best possible course you could possibly give. The second is you're going to have an easier time recruiting affiliates, people that love Ellery Wells and are bought into the Ellery Wells brand, who are going to say, you know what, I can make decent money promoting something that I believe in. I think Ellery's a great guy, and you know what? I think he's worth it. I'm going to go promote for him. Um, and so you're going to have greater success in recruiting your affiliates. And then the other thing is, you know what? If nobody buys, break out some of that content and offer a $400 version of it. And then people will see, oh, you know what? I can't afford the $1,200 one that Ellery's selling. But you know what? I know he's really, he's selling at that level. I'd love to get in. I just can't do it right now. I'll go buy this $400 course. So give them one option, but I would stray away from doing, multiple packages and all that until you've got a really solid sales funnel set up where you know that that's the exact customer that you're trying to attract and they're going to be willing to pay that amount of money. And that's the thing. Once you set the bar high, you're going to rise to the occasion, and you'd be surprised how much will fall into place for you.
Yeah, it's very encouraging, but dang it, Keith, you're giving me more work to do.
That's the job, right? That's the great thing about being a coach. You could just say, well, this is what I would do, and then you can sort of back up and say, all right, I'll see you next week.
It's almost like a psychiatrist. So tell me about your mother.
Yeah, exactly.
and it fills up an hour. As a coach, you say, have you thought about this? Dang it. And it just goes. There was a skit. Oh my gosh. I wish I could find it or knew where I could tell you to go watch it. It was something about, I think it was at Podcast Movement. One of the things about life coaches. Was it Srini that showed that?
Oh yeah.
and it's just funny. Isn't that called just a good friend? Yeah, I don't know. It was funny. I don't even know where we could find that video to put in the show notes. But you are exactly right. And to circle back one more time, I keep derailing us with,
we're just going
questions.
We're good.
So what you mentioned two things to shorten this 8-month cycle, and I know in the corporate world, what did we used to call that? Like speed to delivery or something weird like that. But as one of the things that I try to, one of the things I coach, and I've written a blog post about it, is getting your first product out. So what's another thing that we can do to shorten that 8-month time frame to get that first product out? The first one was getting in front of your audience and really figuring out what they need, what they want, and who they are. And the second one was...
Now you're going to put me on the spot because I don't even remember what my second one was.
I stand when I do my podcast, so I don't have a place to write them all down.
No, that's okay. No, so for me, I think it all came back to the customer. So, it's creating I think my second one was creating a smaller minimum viable product in the lean startup method. So, instead of packing a lot of features in, creating something that was more focused earlier on and getting it in front of the customer quicker. And then the other one, I'm going to stay customer centric for this call because I'm going to give you 4. So one is finding an anchor client. So this is something that I learned from actually Nick Unsworth, who, if folks don't know, he's kind of killing it in his space. He's a business coach, and you could find him at Life on Fire. But he taught me that really finding an anchor client, somebody who you can then point to their success and really translate that for others. So, for example, we've recently started working with some great folks, Chris Brogan being one of them.
Jeff Goins, I saw him on your homepage.
Oh yeah, Jeff. Yeah, so we got
name.
some great testimonials from like Jeff, and we have others. Once we get things updated, you'll be starting to see some other names on there. But what's interesting, right, is that if you can get testimonials, that's one way. The other is getting that anchor client who can really be a success story that you can point to. And then other people say, well, it's good enough for them. It's obviously good enough for me. And that's kind of the same thing with a testimonial, right? The reason you look at it and say, wow, I want to read that is because that, if that person is interested and they're willing to put themselves out for this, then it sure as heck better be good enough for me.
I think that's That's so relevant because I thought the same thing when I pulled up your site before the interview, and I've been there a dozen times over the last several months. But I was like, I did the same thing. I'm part of Jeff Goins' Tribe Riders course, so if it's good enough for him, I mean, my audience isn't as big as his, so if Jeff could use it, I can use it. And the same thing with Chris Brogan. I mean, he talked about making and losing millions of dollars over the last dozen years of doing online business. If it's good enough for Chris, surely it's good enough for me. So I think that anchor client piece, that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, and it'll catapult you. I mean, pretty quickly. It's interesting, right? Because it's a blessing and a curse. Like the minute it leaks that you're doing this with this person, or this person endorses your product or your info product or your book, it takes off. Even like just breaking into a new space. When you get somebody who's really renowned in a specific niche, they don't have to be the New York Times bestseller that Mr. Brogan or others are, but just within that niche, it automatically adds instant credibility within anybody that person has for followers or folks that even just know about that person. And so
yeah,
it truly builds. And the other thing I was just going to say is that if you're doing this stuff on the side, is really setting expectations and dedicating yourself in terms of the time commitment that you're going to provide. Because I think for me, I have
like as a service, like customer care type stuff, or what do you?
No, I'm thinking more of just the amount of time you're going to spend. So when you're starting out with any project, whether it's an info product or whether it's a software business, I think you have to say, okay, these are the hours each week I'm going to spend doing this, and that's all I'm going to spend doing this to start out with until I achieve a certain goal. What you'll find is you'll be far more focused spending, a couple hours on it a day or, a couple nights a week, dedicated to that single task. Like, let's say you're going to launch the new Ellery Wells $1,200 course. Well, you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to work on this these days for, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for, 3 hours. And those are my times to get this product done. And here's my end date goal. And what you'll find is you cut through the clutter really quick, and you end up doing only the things that matter to you and matter to the end goal, as opposed to what I was spending a lot of time doing, which was in the beginning, you're working on, okay, well, I'm gonna go research these customers, and I'm gonna go spend a lot of time on this. I'm gonna do a little bit of that, even though I was crystal clear on what the product should look like. From the market development perspective, I was spending too much time on things that really I got thrown out essentially once we realized that mommy bloggers were fundamentally the wrong audience. We ultimately didn't get any value from that. So all those hours were wasted. But when I was really focused and said, my son's here, I've only got this amount of time to work on it these days and these nights, I started seeing these huge results and focusing only on the things that mattered.
I can completely relate to that, Keith, because every Thursday here in Round Rock, Texas, and where are you again? I forgot.
I'm up in Boston area.
Boston. So what I do every Thursdays is I go to La Madeleine, which I don't think you guys have up there, but it's just like a French coffee shop and bakery and restaurant type thing. And I hop on their Wi-Fi and work for 3 hours. And being away from the house, sitting there drinking coffee, it does what you're talking about. It focuses, and I can get so much done in that 3 hours. Like yesterday, I was working on a blog post, finding pictures and everything, and it's gonna be great. And there's a lot of stuff in there, but it took me most of the day. And I'm not saying I could have done it in 3 hours at La Madeleine, but some of the distractions would have been eliminated. And there's no TV to turn on. There's their Wi-Fi is not quite as fast, so maybe not as many YouTube videos. even if they're setting up sound for your home office or something.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And here's a quick tip for the listener out there: is charge your laptop, unplug it, leave your power cord at home and go to Starbucks or go to one of these places, and you know that you've got 2 hours until the battery dies, and you got to hustle, or 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is. You have to get it all done before your battery dies. And that doesn't apply necessarily to me because I have an Ultrabook and I can go like 6 hours on a battery charge. But that's a great way to do exactly what you're saying and focus and get rid of those. And they're not necessarily distractions either.
Yeah.
And I think you might agree they're good stuff. Connecting on social media, good, or putting a related module on your course. But when you're focused like that, you can cut, and it's not even cutting the fat, but it's really slimming down and becoming very lean and focused and targeted in what you have to deliver to have this minimum viable product, or to launch, or to open your doors for the first time.
It's so true. I mean, that's it. I sort of tell people, have you ever felt like you're getting ready for a vacation? And, especially those that are, worked in the corporate world, if you know you have a vacation coming and it's the day before your vacation, all of a sudden things start getting done. And the last hour before your vacation, you are the most productive I think you will ever be, because you are so ready to get out the door and just have nobody contact you while you're gone, that you are just cranking through stuff. And it's the same thing with a deadline for, a course. I can't tell you how many times I've had a presentation and I get a little too comfortable being able to whip these things up at the last second, but, just for years of doing it. But, I had to teach a course at MIT. In Cambridge, it was an online marketing course.
Dang, dude, that's awesome.
Oh, thanks. So
You've taught at MIT?
I did, yeah. I taught through one of the sessions at MIT, an online marketing series.
Did you go to MIT?
I did not. No, I went to UMass. So I was. Okay. I run a 1,300 person meetup in Boston for online marketing, and
oh, that's what we were. Oh man, we gotta have another episode.
That sounds good to me. So
that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and we're almost out of time. Dang it! Yes, so I definitely need to pick your brain on the meetup part, and I derailed you again. So you're doing this great. This big meetup, and you're talking at MIT doing about marketing.
Yeah, so so the meetup group, we have actually Chris Brogan came and talked to our group. Sue Zimmerman came to talk to our group. We've had a bunch of different folks in the marketing space, and I actually teach courses to that group frequently. And so what it was is I was the MIT group. Someone in the audience was from MIT, came up and actually asked me to do an adjunct course at MIT. And so I'm racking my brain because here I am walking in, and I came from a different engineering school, and I'm thinking these guys are going to be so smart, and I'm not going to be able to teach them anything. And oh my God, they're going to tell me, how the internet works on the inside. How can I teach them anything? And what was interesting was I just procrastinated, and then I said, all right, well, I got an hour left, and it was the night before I had to go in and teach, and I cranked out this presentation, and it was just so focused, and it was the best presentation I think I'd given on that topic. And
so that's the lesson, Keith. Procrastinate.
Exactly. That is my lesson for the day.
Listen up, kids.
Wait as
Don't
long as you can, and then pull the trigger and get it done. No, but what was funny is, the longer I waited, the more the buildup was, right? And my wife always gets on me about this, but she's the person that does it right after the assignment's given. I'm the person that waits, and the longer I wait, I find, and I've started to reduce this, but the longer I wait, the more monumental the task becomes. But when I just give myself, all right, I have an hour to get this done, and then I'm done. It can happen at any point in time now, but I just say, this is the amount of time I have to do this, and I'm going to get it done, and I set the timer on my phone, and I just go, and I get it done. And it's the same effect as waiting to the last second, but without all of the heart palpitations and sweating.
I have definitely been there. Man, I'm looking at the clock, and I know I have to be. I am the Toastmaster today, so I have to get to my Toastmasters meeting. And we didn't exactly get to one of the big topics, just starting meetups, which is how we connected on to have this chat in the first place. But the amount of information and value that I'm getting, and I know the listener's going to get from everything we've talked up to about at this point, is going to be fantastic. So I'm trying to figure out which way do I go? How do I spend the last couple minutes? So I definitely want to have you on again, Keith, to talk about how to start these meetups, because you're obvious. I mean, if you started this thing and you've got one of the biggest names in the online blogging, podcasting industry, with Chris Brogan coming and talking, that's such a fantastic success story, and I want to learn from it, and I want to share that with the audience. I want you to talk about that. But did we get to the fourth thing to shorten the 8 month? So we have the last one you said, or minimum viable product, getting to know people, and my memory is
that's fine. Anchor client.
The anchor client.
Yep.
That was the third one.
And then it's really the fourth was the time. I can give you more, Ellery. I can go all day.
Well, there's four, and maybe we can circle back again. I keep saying that.
Yeah, you learn. I don't know that's why. Good. We've done a lot of circling. I'm getting tired.
I'm getting dizzy over here.
Yeah. No, but I think the the other thing is just honestly, it's just getting out there and launching. I will say that was we spent a lot of time testing before launching, and there's a certain point where you just have to pull the trigger and get something out there, and that's the whole lean startup principle: is really launch and then fix once you get feedback, and keep going through that process. So I would say, launch it as quickly as you possibly can, depending on if it's a physical product or if it's an information product, or as I call it, a digital product. You can, build it after you sell it. You don't always have to deliver things immediately, as long as you let people know when it's going to be available. I have many people that I've coached that have sold a product, which is a series of webinar calls. They do basically a bi-weekly call, and people spend, $200 up front, and they know they're going to get 6 weeks of this, and then they build the content, and then they just launch. And they get a new call link every time there's a call, and they create the content after they've sold, a dozen or more spots, just starting out. So they want to test the content, and then, they get the feedback, and it becomes a packaged course that they can sell later on. So just get out there and launch.
That is fantastic advice. And, take the first step, course correct later. And I think I saw a statistic where the space shuttle that goes from here 1 million miles away to the moon is off course 98% of the time. It's just they can hit, land on a dime on the moon, but they're off course almost the entire time that they're going through their journey. And we don't apply that same wisdom and flexibility to our own businesses. We try to say, hey, I need to be here by December 12th, and we try to figure it all out. And as soon as one thing goes according to plan, we rework our plan, and we never end up getting anywhere. So great advice there at the end, Keith. Being on the Empowered podcast, I always try to ask people, what does the word empower mean? So what does it mean to you, Keith?
So for me, I think of empowerment as picking others up, is giving, people a platform and a place to stand so that they can do their best work. So that's sort of how I think of empowerment. That's
perfect. I think that fits directly in with your business model. You're giving people the tools to do what they do best. I like that. Keith, what was the last movie you saw?
It was that one Gone Girl, which is actually
that was just new.
Scary. I mean, not scary in the gory sense, but oh my God, I heard somebody say you won't trust anybody after you watch that, and it's an incredible movie. But yeah, that was a mind bender.
That's is that Matthew McConaughey?
No, that was Ben Affleck. Both
that's right,
equally
okay.
flexible actors in their style.
Yeah, I don't like scary movies, and there's some that seems like it might fall into that genre that just you don't feel good after you
You
watch it.
don't. You sort of feel dirty and like you're staring at everybody with the stink eye.
Well, there's a couple movies like ones where people do a lot of or sell a lot of drugs. Like I never finished Scarface because I just felt depressed. And then when there's a lot of affairs happening, like husband cheating on a wife or those types of
Yeah.
movies too. Those are the two genres where I just stick away from. They don't make me feel good.
No,
I
no,
mean,
you
I
don't want
don't.
that in your head.
Yeah, I don't have any experience with either one of those types of things, but it's just that it garbage in, garbage
It's
out, man. It's
true.
just
You have to
crap coming
you have
into
to
your
control what you put in your head because honestly, that's your thoughts. They seep into your subconscious and they become your actions. And not that you're going to watch that movie and become a druggy cheater who's going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
But that's why I watch a lot of comedy and also I'm such a Discovery channel geek and stuff like that when I actually do watch TV. So,
I hear you.
but we'll see.
Well, Keith, what is one tip or piece of advice you might give a new entrepreneur who is just starting out and they don't really know if a membership site's for them, but they are open to making some money online? What's a tip or a piece of advice that you could give that person?
So, I mean, I just say define who you are first before you do anything. And it literally starts by just saying, I am. So, like, for example, folks who haven't written a book, when they say, I am an author, they work hard to become an author. When you say, I am an expert at this, you become an expert at that. And I'd say define who that is first. And then the business model really doesn't matter as much as you defining who you are and delivering value to the world in that way. So people see you as that. And then it can be an ebook, it can be a membership site, it could be an online course. All of those business models can sort of fall into place once you've defined very clearly and gotten social proof and feedback that, the free content you provide is being consumed and is valuable.
I like that. Jeff Goins calls it finding your worldview. I asked the question, what do you want to be known for? And Keith Griffis says, I am, and fill in the blank. So that's great advice there, Keith. If someone wanted to thank you for being on the show or check out you and what you're up to on social media or something, where can we send them?
So actually they can head over to a website I set up for this, myproductgift.com. And it's a URL where you can download a ton of free resources on membership sites and creating your own online course.
That's awesome. And that was myproductgift.com, right?
That is correct.
Man, you've been listening to some Tim Page, I bet.
You know it.
Yeah, you're inspiring me yet again, Keith. That's something that I need to work on. So, Keith, again, thank you for coming on the show. I definitely want to have you back on to talk about meetups and just we didn't even get to why you started this whole thing. I would love to delve into that some more. So, Keith, thank you for adding so much value to me and the audience today, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Ellery. I appreciate that you're out there doing the things you're doing. It's phenomenal stuff.
Like I mentioned, we didn't have a whole lot of time to really dive into how Keith really has just created some phenomenal success with his meetup. But I have a feeling that if you stick around, if you stay tuned to ElleryWells.com, if you join my email list, you'll be seeing Keith and I working on something again here in the very near future. So make sure you do that. Go to empoweredpodcast.com/70 to make sure you download Keith's tips for reducing the amount of time it takes you to get going. When I learned about Keith's tips, I changed so many things in my business. My email or my course that used to be $1,200 and has 20-something modules, I immediately started organizing and putting together ways to condense that into something that can be consumed in a much shorter amount of time. If you're interested in taking a look at that course, and if you want to get it in its full state, the time to do that is probably fairly limited. I don't know how long it's going to be available, but if you go to empoweredpodcast.com/70, they're the sponsor for the show. My training course, Turn Your Offline Expertise into an Online Business. It's 20-something modules showing you everything from blogging tips, how to set up podcasts and blogs, and all of the tools that you need to start an online business. So if you want all of that in its entirety right now, you can go there and get that. And there's, again, so many videos, and it's incredible value, but I think it might be a little bit much. Just some full transparency there. Hopefully that doesn't come to bite me, but I just want to be honest with you. I think it's a little bit much, and just based on this conversation that I had with Keith, again, I'm making some changes, and maybe you're making changes too. If you are deciding that you're going to do something a little bit different with your business, if you go to, again, empoweredpodcast.com/70, down in the comments, I'd love to know what kind of changes that you are going to make. But make sure you go there, download Keith's tips for reducing the time it will take for you to launch. We'll see you in the next episode where we wrap up this live event series with Jason Gaynard, who started Mastermind Talks, which, if you didn't know, the tickets for those are in the thousands of dollars, and he's going to talk about how you can do the exact same thing. And that'll wrap up our live event series. Thank you for tuning into the Empowered Podcast. My name is Ellery Wells. I'm your host. We'll see you next week. Yeah, if you could go to empoweredpodcast.com/iTunes and leave a rating and review, that'd be great.